Welcome to this webinar on mental health and coping during the COVID-19 pandemic. The panel discussion will address some current realities, strategies, resources, and support in coping with mental health, anxiety, and wellness. The panel consists of specialist contributors in the field of mental health, wellness, energy healing, coping with economic constraints. And I think with what you are heading in, we will make the conversation a bit more enriching. I'd love to introduce to you our first speaker, Dr. Surya van die Oon, who's a registered educational psychologist, a master certified coach, adult education specialist, and many more. So, just a little bit about Surya. In her words, she says, I'm known for working with individuals, groups, teams, and organizations who seek to thrive despite the complexity and uncertainty emerging from the diversity of our experiences. I have an ability to stay steady as well as enable this in others while nurturing ingenuity. I encourage small changes rather than big overhauls, drawing on what works. We tweak and nudge to improve. Surya's expertise draws on education, systems thinking, adult education, both in the academic and business environment. And within that space, she has played the role of senior lecturer and primary school teacher and educational psychologist. She also draws from leadership and management, and within that space, provincial registrar of CCMA. Adult learning space, and within that space, she combines creative strategies with academic and professional skills, so far as to bridge the gap between the world of ideas and the world of action. And a doctorate is on the development of ecosystemic thinking by adult learners. Just some closing thoughts on Surya, then I'm going to hand over to her. And she says, I specialize in activity-based learning, reflective practice, and exploring ingenuity, simplicity, and counterintuitive and constructive conversations. I enjoy integrating my academic education with my practitioner work and life experience in order to offer creative, high-quality, enjoyable, while rigorous learning opportunities. So I enjoyed reading that or talking about that as much as I think I'm going to enjoy you talking. Over to you.
Hi, I'm saying hello from Cape Town in South Africa, where it is the beginning of the working day, and I'm aware that we're talking with people from many, many different areas, but for me, that perhaps is one of the things that I would like to offer straight away about the issue of mental health and coping, is that there's no doubt in my mind that the more embodied we are, the more likely it is that we will actually have a sense of knowing where we are in this world and in this experience. The more disembodied we all become. And I think Zoom, I heard a comment, which was someone said, our world has become Zoomified. And I thought it was quite an interesting comment. And by Zoomified, I think it really means disembodied. Right, in my sort of contribution to this panel, I've been asked to say something about mental health and coping as a way of framing it. I have made one or two slides because I thought with an international global audience, it's sometimes very helpful to have some visuals as well as hear my voice. So I'm going to share my screen, and Cindy, if you could be my tech elf and just tell me if you don't see what's going on, or if they're black stripes, because that's the COVID results of my one computer, is it's got black stripes. Don't know what that is. Okay, so one of the things that struck me about the topic of this panel was this word realities. And I thought, what actually does that mean? I think we say this word reality very easily, but what is it really, what are we really talking about when we say realities? And what I'd like to ask you to do, if you're, with us, whether you're in YouTube or whether you're live, is to just think for a moment to yourself, is what do you remember about the day or days when you first became aware that life as you knew it might be about to change in ways that you were not yet even able to imagine? So what I remember in South Africa was that there was a sudden flurry of people starting to send WhatsApps and Facebooks and saying, you need to listen to the radio and switch on the TV. The president is going to talk and we're going to go into this thing which is called lockdown. And nobody even knew what that was, except that people felt it sounded like a prison. So one of the first responses that I think a lot of people had was, I'm losing the sovereignty over my own life. And I think that there's a sense that with mental health and wellness, one has a sense of sovereignty over one's own life, not necessarily that one's in control of everything, but the sense of that you can make a difference about how your life works. So you might have noticed some responses, and the traditional ones when we face a crisis, I think are well known to everyone, was traditionally we thought about fight, flight, freeze. And then we had a whole lot of research which came out starting in the 60s and 70s when people began to realize that this fight, flight, freeze had been premised on looking at leaders in organizations, most of whom were male, and that there weren't many female leaders at the time. That has changed. It's still not perhaps as we would like to see it, but that in fact there was another response. So it was fight, flight, freeze, and what became known as tend and befriend, which is linked to certain other kinds of responses in the body and in your brain chemicals. Now, what I'm going to do is not speak a lot about brain chemicals and neuroscience, etc., but rather to stay with meaning making. And in terms of meaning making, I suppose my question to all of us is, if we remember back to those first few days of COVID-19 sort of coming into our lives, into our worlds, is to think to yourself, how were you in relation to yourself? How were you in relation to close people? How were you in relation to acquaintances and colleagues? And how were you in relation to strangers? And to just give some thought to that, about that all of us will have had a reality which was our reality and may not have been that similar to anyone else's. On the slide, you should see a small snail appear. And why I've chosen this image is that I'd like to propose to all of us that we construct homes for our mental health. And like the snail and its shell, when those homes are threatened, or worse yet, if we become homeless and we're not a slug, which is accustomed to having no shell, but is like a snail, but not a snail. So if our home is threatened or we become homeless, that's when we begin to discover things about our coping responses. And I'd like to show you something which I use quite a lot in my teaching and ask you for a moment to just look at this and think to yourself, what do I see? If you're on with us live, you might want to put into the chat. That's up to you, but otherwise just have a look. It goes like that. So what you might see is you might see this as opportunity is nowhere. You might see this as opportunity is now here. And we all know about ambiguous pictures, but I like this one particularly because the thing that I would like to raise to our attention is that if you see it as opportunity is nowhere, it invites you to a particular response to COVID-19, to pandemics, to your situation. If you see this as opportunity is now here, it has a different invitation in terms of responsiveness. And I don't know about in your world, but certainly in my world, there's a lot of talk about the following, about getting to the new normal. And I'm slightly irreverent, so I always want to say, well, why would you want to be normal if you can be spectacular or amazing or lovely or generous or kind? But anyway, mental health is something that is connected to normal. But at the moment, I think, if we're not going back to so-called normal, then what are we trying to go towards? And how do we find a sense of steadiness? So what I'd like to go on to is saying something about mental health and how do you create a home for coping? I think that people assume that everyone has a home for coping, and I don't think that's necessarily so. And particularly, how do we create homes for coping when we face uncertainty? And one of the things I know about coaches that I work with in terms of mental health when I work as a supervisor is I hear them say things like, oh, this client was so okay when we started, but where did this come from? What they're now talking about or how they're now manifesting. And I think that for many coaches, we would have experienced both in ourselves and in our clients this phenomenon of, I thought I knew this person, or I thought I had an idea about this person, and now look. And I think that this has happened to a lot of friendships. So one of the tragedies that I know many people faced is that they began to discover that they really didn't like some of their friends very much anymore, or their family members, because of people's responses. Um, so I'd like to read you something which kind of illustrates this issue of, is there such a thing as a reality? And I'll read it aloud to you because it may be too small on the screen. It goes like this. Today was the absolute worst day ever. And don't try to convince me that there's something good in every day, because when you take a closer look, the world is a pretty evil or dangerous place. Even if some goodness does shine through once in a while, satisfaction and happiness don't last. And it's not true that it's all in the mind and the heart, because true happiness can be obtained only if one's surroundings are good, and it's not true that good exists. I'm sure you can agree that reality creates my attitude. It's all beyond my control. And you'll never in a million years hear me say that today was a good day. And this is the kind of mental set, all right, which encourages you to respond in a particular way. However, if you start at the bottom and go the other way around, listen to what this mental set creates. Today was a good day, and you will never in a million years hear me say that it's all beyond my control. My attitude creates my reality. I'm sure you can agree that it's not true that good exists only if one's surroundings are good. True happiness can be obtained because it's all in the mind and the heart. And it's not true that satisfaction and happiness don't last. Some goodness does shine through once in a while, even if this world is a pretty evil or dangerous place. Because when you take a closer look, there's something good in every day. And don't try to convince me that today was the absolute worst day ever. So I would really encourage you to just give some thought to not the simplicity or the simplistic idea of it depends on how we see it, but the reality of the complexity of that there are particular ways to see things that make a difference. So what I'd like to offer is, here are a few things that we know as coaches, but I think are worth revisiting. Is, how do we go about trying to invite the bottom up reality in people? And when people are struggling with mental health, anxiety, depression, stress, as Cindy was saying, is acknowledge, don't reassure, which may seem counterintuitive. And Cindy said that about me. The difference between saying to somebody, I hear that you feel extremely anxious, which is different from, don't worry, you're not in the vulnerable group, you'll be fine. Okay. So there's something about that. It's a natural thing to want to reassure, but in fact, reassurance often does the opposite. It makes people feel that their reality is being denied. Then I think as coaches, we all know, inquire rather than advocate or illustrate. And when you have inquired, listen and imagine, rather than saying that you understand. I mean, I don't know how many of you have had this experience, but I've certainly had it where if I've made the error, which I try not to make the error anymore, I used to when I was a younger coach, say, I can understand what you mean. And people would say, no, you can't possibly. And then they would point out why my reality or my circumstances had nothing similar to their circumstances. And if you live in a very diverse country, as I do in South Africa, the diversity is greater than, the similarity. And certainly interpretations don't help at all. Like, do you know my mind better than I know my own? And I wanted to remind us all, I chose this little picture rather than a person picture of a dog, because I thought this dog illustrates we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for very good reasons. And in this time when we are confronted with so much anxiety, stress, I think it's about listening and saying less. Not that I'm illustrating how to do that right now. Okay, so partly what I'd also like to offer is words have energy and words invite responses. That should be obvious by now. And that words coming out of what comes out of our mouth as coaches does really matter. So best we watch what comes out of our mouths. And this word has been coming out a lot, and you may not even be able to read what it is initially, because I deliberately put some art onto it. Okay, the word is trauma, trauma. I've been hearing people saying, oh, so you're traumatized. It's very traumatic. This is a trauma. And just like this visual is distorted, I think for many people, saying to them, there's a trauma happening to you, is the first time that they begin to feel traumatized. Or they feel a sense of survivor guilt because they think, why am I not feeling traumatized? And I've spoken to quite a lot of entrepreneurs recently who've been saying that they actually see this as a time of opportunity, and they feel badly when they talk to people who are having trouble with their businesses. So I think this word trauma, we need to be cautious about the way we use it. So what instead? Because, in true coaching style, if you're not going to say trauma, well, then what are you going to say instead? I think the positive deviance research, which some of you may know about, which is sort of characterized by the shrimp story in Vietnam, is asking yourself, what can we learn from the people who are coping? So having conversations with people who are coping, and if you're working with people who are having mental health difficulties, is to actually try and find out how much time and how many conversations are they having with people who are quite steady, rather than having this endless conversation about how bad things are. The other thing is the we, is to talk about we, as in everyone's in this in different ways, but they are in it together, rather than the me, and overemphasizing my particular version of the story. I've mentioned that I think survivor guilt is really a problem for a lot of people who's saying, I don't actually feel that bad. I've actually quite liked being in lockdown and things like that. Whoops. Sorry. And then I'd like to offer some resources in starting to close out, is that I think mental ill health is a seductive topic. Okay, it's very cool. There's a lot of language, there's a lot of research. It's terribly interesting for the intellect. We get interested in trying to figure out what's wrong with this person, etc. But it isn't the scope of practice of coaches. And I think one has to watch one's words. I'm hearing more and more coaches talk about narcissistic leaders as an example. And I think woe betide you if that's found on a piece of paper or etc. When somebody says, what do you mean? Are you a psychiatrist or a psychologist that you can use this word, that you can make this diagnosis? And I also think we need to be aware of being too attached to positivity. Coaches are known for this positivity language. And when people are in a hole, feeling very threatened, feeling isolated, not knowing where to go, they don't need silver linings to turn up on their conversational doorsteps and start saying, oh, it'll be, it's fine, and you're so capable, etc. So that's why I mentioned this thing of acknowledge, don't reassure, and certainly don't drag people into some kind of positive future, because maybe that's not the future they want to go into. I've put this resource up because I'm not sure how many people are even aware. It's in the ICF website. It's very useful. It's a one-sheet client referral guide for coaches, and I think it really has some good ideas. Open spaces are great, is having conversations. I had lots where I just listened to what people were experiencing, not what their opinions were, but what they were experiencing. And then I do training around this sort of topic about how do you resourceful respond if you're a coach in relation to all this mental health. But here's some particular things that I'd like to offer, and then I'd like to hand back over and hand to the next panelist. is for coaches, is focus on coachability, not mental health assessment. What is coachability? It's the person's capability of having a conversation in which they have enough concentration capacity to actually focus and to be able to be in a conversation. And the other thing is, can they use feedback, and are they willing and open to using feedback from their own world and from you? Because that's what coachability is about. And that's what you need to know, not about what particular disorder or syndrome they might have. The other thing is to promote learning via feed forward. And I call it feed forward because as soon as you talk about feedback, people think, oh, I should have done that. Whereas when you say to them, what can you learn from this so that for the future or the present, you can do something different, I think that they become more aware of their interconnectedness, and also that experiments can never fail. Is like your job is to just simply support them in giving it a go. Would they be willing? And I've done some very interesting work with people who are allegedly very depressed and anxious, and that thing of just sparking hope that possibly they could try something different and then get a different response, I think is very, very powerful. So, I mean, for coaches, we know this: focus on capability and coping, but don't minimize pain, suffering, and stuckness, because that's where people will start resisting you and going, you don't understand, let me tell you again how hard it is. And finally, is to activate naturally occurring resources in the client's world. Please resist becoming the emergency 24/7 service. Coaches are not well placed to be like the ambulance and the fire brigade. They usually aren't in practices that allow for that. And what do I mean by that? In other words, is try to get your clients to see what is in their world, whether it's the dog that they can walk, the neighbor who they haven't spoken to for days, the person that they, need to be in touch with, whatever. What resources are there in their lives that can help them support themselves with uncertainty? Because my feeling is that this pandemic, besides all the things it is, I think this pandemic is a pandemic of uncertainty and management of oneself in relation to uncertainty, and finding mental health within uncertainty, discovering one's own identity of how do I stay healthy, respond resourcefully, stay steady, be compassionate, uh, tolerate my own vulnerabilities as a human being in this time of such uncertainty. Cindy, thank you. That's me. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and switch myself onto mute. We're not hearing you. You'll need to do a wiggle or a jiggle.
Can you hear me now? I'll jiggle later.
You can. We can hear you now. Technology is not as powerful as Cindy in herself.
Right. And thank you for that. I mean, I love that dog with the big ears. Reminds us about openness to listening, and so much more. I should have done a better framing. Not too late, I can do it now. Our four panelists will highlight different aspects of mental health and COVID and coping. And you've just heard Sver talk about mental health. Our next speaker is going to talk more around physical wellness. And Ifti will address energy, all things around your energy. And Sangeeta is going to address coping around finances. And our panelists will address some tools, tips, and insights on what you can walk away with. I would love to introduce you to our next panelist. Let me pull out my notes. Vijay is a master certified coach from ICF and an experienced management consultant. She also has a certification in systemic and team coaching. Her coaching specialties include executive, leadership, and wellness coaching. working with both individuals and businesses. She's a multifaceted management professional with 20 years of experience in consulting and human resources. She has a background in law and is an accredited mediator. Vijay currently serves on the ICF Chennai chapter as the president. I was going to say president elect, but this is October. So I think she's serving as president. She's passionate about all things sports and fitness. She's a certified SKF kettlebell and GFM movement instructor. Kettlebell. She believes coaching can support individuals in their wellness journey and contribute to creating an healthier planet, one person at a time. Vijay, thank you. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Cindy, for that super generous introduction. And I am very excited, and I can already feel that positive energy. Thanks to Swaya, she, I think, just set such a easy frame. I just felt myself completely loosen up. I would just wish I had a cup of chai to go along, but I don't. So I'm just going to make good with just the energy in the space. So just building on, from where you contexted, Cindy, I am going to bring in some aspects of the physical dimension of wellness, but I just want to do a little bit of framing. I do have a few slides that I will, run today, this session, the participants through. And the frame is this. And I really go back into, the space of wellness coaching and mentoring. And what I do pick up in recent times, which is great actually, right? This whole focus on the more than physical elements or dimensions of wellness. Taking a multi-dimensional, holistic approach, which is what I hold passionately as, a wellness professional, which could be emotional, social, occupational, spiritual, all of these dimensions. And yet, while doing, the whole expansive approach, somewhere I feel clients, and I would even say myself, are losing touch with what we all very obviously connect to, which is the physical dimension, which is all about our bodies, as distinct from, let's say, looking at your mind or your emotions in that sense. I know that the lines are very, very gray, but just stay with me as I frame this. And so today's attempt is actually a little bit of reverse contexting. Usually in wellness sessions, the topic will be on, being fit and healthy and all of that. And then we bring in the other dimensions, mental, spiritual, occupational, all of that to sort of support this and context it. But today is different because the topic is mental health and mental wellness and coping. And I would try to bring the physical lens to say how this actually adds up and how caring and coping with our bodies and our physical dimension can actually support us with our mental health. Must also share a bit of a, personal example, very, very recent for me to believe this is true, and a validation. Cindy, you are aware of it. September, I think the last day of September, I just finished a webinar. Everything was good, and I had my plans for October. It was sort of nicely packed. Everything was in place, and then that night, I felt something very strange going on in my body. I didn't have a fever. I didn't have anything, but I just felt very strange, and I just knew in my inside that I was going somewhere. And that somewhere was not a nice place. Very soon, within 48 hours, I became quite sick and, in absolutely no position to do anything. And the next 10 days were quite awful because I really did not know what had happened to me. And, we must understand the larger COVID context where even diagnosis, is a bit of a borderline. So we just go and I think the approach is to just feel better and to, cure that. So with all that, thanks to my doctor and, myself and all of that, my family and friends like you, Cindy, I managed that phase. But and for the first time, I think I was to be a panelist on, a webinar on this series, something that was very close to my heart. And I had to call in and I had to say a regret, right? Many things just changed in that time. And despite being a wellness practitioner, the struggle, right, was so real. None of what I actually knew, it's very difficult to sort of coach yourself through that. And the point I want to make is, though I was mentally, quite okay, and, I didn't have any other challenges except being unwell, right? I was so totally disconnected. The pace of my body and my mind was so mismatched. And I'm sure maybe Ifti will talk about it as he, shares about energy. But for me, there were two parts of me not in sync. And the energy was crazy because my mind was also ready, but my body just said, no, time out, 20 days. The point I'm trying to make is, unless this vessel, this instrument is really there and, playing at its highest potential, it's very difficult to mentally or emotionally just be in a good space. So that's really the context. And I'm just going to run us through a few slides, like Svea said, because I know this is a mixed audience and I just want the contexting. Can you see my screen? Thank you. So quickly, just to jump in with a little bit of a definition. When we talk physical wellness, we talk about all of these things. Yeah, maybe there's a little more, but largely we talk about these things: exercise, activity, movement, your diet, sleep, energy levels, understanding and appreciating your body, its signals, and I mean in a very, very physical sense, right? Feeling good about your own body. And finally, health promoting behaviors, which is very, very important in a time like this, where you have to be monitoring yourself from time to time. So if I were to put it in 4 fundamental building blocks, yeah, when you look at physical wellness, there is activity, there is food, there is sleep, and the last one, which is equally important, which I call embodied living. I'm now going to share, a few lessons. Maybe there are a few hidden hacks in there, which I think I have learned in these last 8 months, personally, and also in, working with my clients. And I am just so grateful to each of them. In each of those journeys, there was inspiration that you take away. The first one is, and I'm just going to talk 4 things. Some of this, which I'm going to talk about, may seem very simplistic, but in the simplicity, in the basics, in the fundamental, lies great power. And so as you listen in for the next couple of minutes, I would like you to soak it in your own context and think about it. There is no rocket science here. First one is about moving better. A simple mantra when it comes to movement is move often, move better. Yeah. Just doing this can actually be so empowering and so wonderful on the body. And what do I mean by movement? Movement is not planned exercise. So it's not about, doing 1 hour of running or yoga or kettlebell training, all of which are very important. Yeah, and it has a role. But today I'm talking about everyday simple movement that we do. Just think about yourself in these last few months, largely if you're a professional who, and I know Swaya mentioned about Zoomified, the amount of time you are actually sitting, has it gone up, has it come down? And how much do you intentionally move? And we must think multi-dimensional, multi-planar movement, this fundamental movement which will work all your muscle groups. And if I might break it down, there are 7 fundamental movements: pushing, pulling, squatting, lunging, hinging or bending, twisting or rotation, and gait. We often take these for granted. But my invitation to you is to think about how might you integrate these fundamental movements in your day-to-day life. So simply put, when you lift a heavy object from up top, it's actually a pull movement that you're doing. But how much of it do we actually integrate? How often do we sit on the floor? How often do we cross our feet? How often when we pick an object, we pick it the right way? How much do we attempt to make our body consciously in balance? How much do we do unidimensional work? The other thing that I want to talk about is embracing primal movement. Primal movement, like the image in my chart, is about movement that comes very naturally from the time you're an infant. It involves things like crawling, rolling, jumping, crouching, animal kind of movements. These movements are something that comes naturally, but over a period of time, as we condition ourselves, as we grow and become adults, we forget a whole lot of these. And maybe after the session, just try crawling like how you would when you were a baby. And I know a lot of adults actually find it very, very uncomfortable. A movement that was so joyous only 20 or 30 or 40 years ago suddenly seems very alien. When you embrace primal movement, you go into a very primal state where you're just absolutely in your own skin. Try some of these. There are primal movement, there are programs that encourage this. Ground force method in which I'm trained is one of those that allow you to do simple movement for the sake of moving well in a very primal fashion. And when you do that, you also get into a state of play. Playing, especially in times like these, is again very therapeutic. Those of you who have children at that age who would love to play, just try impulsively jumping into play, one that involves movement. It is the best detox that you can get in an otherwise stressed out day. So it doesn't mean that only those with children can play, right? Even as adults, go ask yourself, I know it might sound a little silly, but can you go back and play hopscotch at home? What would happen to you? Go there and try it. But moving better is a great first step towards helping you cope especially in a time like this where coping has become so important. The next dimension I want to talk about is eat better. I think COVID-19 has created an amazing once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for all of us to do a food reset and detox. Let's embrace it. With, at least in the early months, with resources being so scarce, labor being not available, ability to order in and dine out almost becoming negligible. Just look back and think about what happened in your homes, in your lives. By default, we embraced clean, simple, and whole approach to food. We ate lesser, meaning lesser variety, because we had other things to do. We ate what mattered, and we were creative about it. So food mindfulness, being very mindful about what goes in, and minimalism, to me, personally, it were two huge gains in this period. I stopped craving, restaurant food, and I realized what I craved was probably the social interaction of going out with family, with friends. And when you do this, when you embrace food mindfulness and minimalism, it again, I think, just makes you feel a lot more empowered that, food is required, but it's not something that you can't make your ally and make it work for you. The third thing that I want to talk about, again, you might be thinking, such commonsensical things I'm bringing up, but like a friend of mine once said, yeah, commonsensical. Common sense is not actually that common. So these are more like reiterations to my own self. Sleep is the best immunity builder. I think there's enough written and said about it. And yet, how many of us actually slept better in these times? Yeah, clients would tell me that sometimes teams and organizations expect you to be always on because you're anyway at home, right? So what happens to sleep cycles? I know a lot of us made Netflix our best friend. And in all of that binge watching and endless hours of it, the one thing that took a toll was sleep. I'm not here trying to moralize to not do any of these, right? Those were coping mechanisms as well. But I'm trying to just say that let's be smart about sleep. Let's make sleep our friend. Reestablish your sleep windows. I knew somebody who would feel very difficult, guilty about taking a 30-minute afternoon nap. And yet that's all that's required to ensure that you plow through an otherwise endlessly, ongoing day. Beware the bedroom office. I know most of us are doing that. For most parts, I am doing that as well. And the big one that takes a hit is sleep. Finally, don't feel guilty about sleeping. In these last 3 weeks, I have slept, and I'm being very open about it, at all odd times of the day. But that was one thing that I think really helped me recuperate. And oh yes, very strongly connected with sleep is the sun. And we all know melatonin is a biggest gain for all of us. Get the sun. My final bit for taking care of physical wellness and coping is living better. You can live better when you live in an embodied fashion. And what is embodiment? Embodiment is simply about being in tune with your body, developing a felt sense, not just listening to your body, but allowing that listening to translate to awareness. I know it's not very easy, but it is a skill that can be acquired. Listening, being aware, and then responding on time. I even feel a situation like what we are in today, a lot of us must tap into our inner intuition and wisdom to see how we can take care of our bodies even before it becomes too late. Always listen to your body. And that's that. I want to conclude with this, that everything is connected.
Thank you, Vijay. Lovely points. I can be heard, right? I'm audible?
You are.
Okay, thank you. Mindful of the time, so I'm going to hand over to our next speaker. And before I do that, I would like to encourage our participants that are joining us on Zoom. Please can you type your questions or any discussion points you want to raise. As soon as this panel has presented their piece, we will have an open discussion and include all your questions and discussion points. Our next speaker who brings in a wealth of information on finances and all things associated to finances. I'd love to welcome Sangeeta Shankaran Sumesh. If I got that right, Shankaran Sumesh. Sangeeta creates positive impact through high performance and high profits. As the CEO and founder of Gymnastic, Sangeeta is on a mission to enable, empower, and elevate businesses with a purpose to serve leaders, teams, and entrepreneurs to shine and succeed. She has a rich corporate experience of 25 years with multinationals, and her latest position was as the Executive Director and Chief Financial Officer of Dun & Bradstreet Technologies. Sangeeta is a chartered accountant, management accountant, and completed executive education from Harvard Business School. She is a high-performance business coach, a PCC from International Coaching Federation, a professional speaker, and a best-selling author. Some of the accolades she received: she was awarded Leading Woman Chief Financial Officer in India, India's most influential woman in finance, innovator in finance at the International Women Leaders Forum, and awarded 100 Inspiring Authors of India, and Outstanding Professional Award by IFCCI. Sangeeta is a keynote speaker at many national and international events, forums, and corporates on business finance, high performance, and leadership. She believes in value creation for her clients. She is an independent director at IFB Industries Limited. Without saying any more, I'd love to invite Sangeeta to please go ahead.
Thank you, Cindy, for the nice introduction. And I loved the sessions by both Swaya and Vijay. So here I am, taking another dimension of wellness. And I think mental wellness is important for both high performance and high profits. One of the factors that affect the mental wellness is definitely finance, because if you don't have enough money, your thoughts get distorted and you're constantly under worry. That leads to your, that impacts your mental wellness. So here I am. I don't have slides, but I'm going to share with you a real life story of one of my clients. And I would like you to use some of these reflections and some of these tools that I'm here to share with you. So like we know, the current times are already very challenging, both mentally and emotionally. And I think a lot of us are going through a lot already. And if you were to have some challenges coming in from the finance dimension as well, then it only makes things worse. So I have seen individuals who have been impacted because of the job losses, or even entrepreneurs finding it very difficult because of the finance challenge that they've been having for their business. So here I'm going to tell you the story. Let's say the person's name is Shri. Shri had been a successful entrepreneur for the last 5-6 years, and he was running a couple of 3 different business verticals. But however, Shri had never paid importance to finance because money was just coming in, the businesses were flourishing, and he always thought, money management was the responsibility of his auditor or accountant, and he was just taking it easy on the finance side and focusing just on the business, like most entrepreneurs do. However, the current scenario was a big blow to Sri, and he started to face a lot of cash crunch. And he claimed it was because of lower demand, heavy competition from cheaper products, and the loans that had to be paid off by Sri. This was giving him a lot of sleepless nights because he was unable to pay the school fees of his children. And to make things worse, his father got sick, and he had a lot of medical expenses as well that had to be paid. On the business front, the salaries were due, and he didn't have enough money to pay the salaries of the staff. So because of all this, he started having a lot of sleepless nights, impacting his mental wellness. And to bail himself out from the situation, what Sri thought was the best would be for him to go and get himself some loans. Take a loan so that his temporary issues are resolved, and then he can look at it at a later date. The funny part was, though he had decided to take a loan, he wasn't even sure what was the amount that he needed to take as loan, because he just felt overwhelmed. He knew a lot of the money he needed were both in his personal front, his business front, and he didn't even know how much he had to really quantify, because again, he didn't want to go overboard with the loans. So that's when he came to me, and he was pouring his heart out, saying, I'm in such a deep fix. Every day is a challenge for me, and I'm having sleepless nights. So why am I telling you this? So this, I want to highlight, while loans can be good, one must differentiate between a good loan and a bad loan. Now, what is a good loan? A good loan, for example, it could be when you're buying an asset for the business, therefore your business could be growing because of the new asset that is required. Probably, let's say the asset is enabling you to produce more for the business, right? So, and therefore it is generating revenue for you, and therefore it becomes a good asset. However, on the contrary, if you were to look at the personal finance, is every asset good? That's a question you need to ask yourself, because it's important to differentiate between an appreciating asset and a depreciating asset. The common example of a depreciating asset is a car, right? You buy a car today, and for whatever reasons you want to sell it after, let's say, even 2 months, would you get back the same amount? Whereas if, let's say, you were to invest it in a land or real estate or stocks, whatever, depending on taking the wise call, the chances of appreciation are much better. So you need to first, before taking any loan, take a moment's pause and see if it is going to be a good loan or a bad loan. What is an example for a bad loan? It could be in a business context to pay your bills, your monthly bills, like your rentals, your staff salaries. That means your business is not generating enough revenue to pay your running expenses. And therefore, a loan taken for such instances would only solve your problem temporarily. In the personal case, supposing people get carried away by these fancy gadgets, the new iPhone 12 is being launched. So people take a loan or, take a monthly installment scheme to get it. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't, because end of the day, you need to satisfy your desires as well. But the question you need to ask is, does your financial capability allow you, does it permit you to get it? Because month on month, I find so many people getting pinched by the loan repayments, the monthly EMIs that they need to pay. They feel the pinch at a later date. While it's always good to acquire something that you want, how is it serving you? Even if it's serving you, how is it helping you financially? Or is it draining you financially? So that is something one needs to check before getting into, before opting for any loan. So as a business coach, coming back to Shree's case, I made him realize that what seemed like a short-term way out could actually, lead him to similar situation in the long term unless he was able to correct and, take the right financial decisions for his business. So my friends, for you, what I would like you to reflect on is, how are you differentiating between a good loan and a bad loan? So what is your criteria for it? And what is your financial purchasing capability before taking a loan? So it's just that before opting for any loan, one must take it, with full awareness and understand the financial implications and repercussions that come out of it. So the first thing I wanted to highlight to you was about the loan. The second thing, going back to the Shri story. Now, what had happened, like I mentioned, he didn't know how much was the loan that he even needed to take, and he had no clue about the money that was available to him and how much more money was required by him. So the first thing I got him to do was to prepare his cash flow statement, his cash flow projections. What was it in the past? And, how does the future look like for him and his business? So that he would first get an idea of the cash requirements that he needed. And once he had prepared this cash flow analysis, it was funny because the business by itself was able to sustain itself financially. So where was the money being leaked? Shri was using a lot of the business money to repay his home loan. And that was a huge amount. And considering that the business operations had shrunk due to the current times, this was impacting him in the business and as well as his personal challenges. So both ways, Shri was in a bad state financially. And not just that, the projected cash flow also revealed that, a lot of the money dues that were Shri had to get from his customers from his business perspective, he hadn't been collecting them on time. And that was also impacting his cash flow. So what is my takeaway here for you from this lesson is, the first thing is you need to know your cash position, be it for your business or for your personal usage. Many people I come across, they don't know how much is the exact cash that they have, or how are they going to plan to utilize it. So the first thing, know your cash position. The second thing, especially when you're pressed and having a cash challenge, is to prepare a budget and then also a forecast, because that helps you, gives you a better visibility and better clarity on how you want to spend the money that you have. So I have given some of these templates in my book. It's called What the Finance, WTF for short. So you can look at it if you want some templates, and that will tell you how you can manage your cash better, because if cash is impacted, then a whole lot of peace, mental peace is gone. I always say cash is like oxygen. You always need to have the cash, otherwise you're going to be in for trouble. So the other thing I want to again give you as the takeaway is the acronym. I love giving acronyms because the recall value is much better. So if you were to remember cash as an acronym, how would that look like? So C stands for collect on time. Whatever money is due to you, like, in Shri's example, we saw that he wasn't collecting on time. And I have also seen people who tend to give loans and not collect the dues on time. So the C stands for collect on time. A is to anticipate your cash in and cash out so that you know how much money you're expecting and how you can actually spend the money the way you want. S is to systematically monitor, because at any point in time before you want to take any financial decision, you need to know how much cash you have. So you need to systematically monitor the cash that you have, and hedge is the habit of reserves. Especially during times like these, we've seen how important it is to have reserves. So especially liquid reserves, so that in case of any emergency, you're left with some cash to handle the current situation that you're left with. So my friends, again, I'd like you to think about how much cash do you have, and what would be the optimal number so that you feel you are safe, so that you're not impacted by having sleepless nights and and not having to really worry about the cash situation. The last thing that I want to tell you is, again, going back to Shree's example, this financial mess that he was in, it is one common mistake that most entrepreneurs do. That is, they mix the personal finance with the business finance. While it's the same person, the money belongs to probably the same person. Legally, they are two different entities. The business is a different entity compared to the individual, and therefore, one mustn't be mixing around the two. So, in Shree's example, what he had done was, he had failed to pay himself a salary. And, whenever the business had enough money, when I say enough money, it was just the revenues that were coming in. He was utilizing all the money in a lavish way and therefore living beyond his means. And the entire impact of it, he felt it now when the business was impacted, and everything came to him as a blow because he didn't have the enough purchasing power within himself. So the takeaway number 3 I'd like to leave you with is to live within means. Now, when I say this, many people again ask me, how, is there a framework? So I call this the principle of essentialism. So it's very simple. Divide it into 3 buckets: highly essential, essential, and non-essential. You can use this especially when you're having a cash crunch and when you want to conserve the cash. So while highly essential and non-essential are a no-brainer, the gray area is the essential one. Now, how does one go about, let's say you go grocery shopping and you find some knickknacks, you find a nice juice, you find a drink for yourself, and or you're tempted by some online shopping. How does one balance between being frugal and overindulging themselves? So that's where this essential bucket, which is a gray area. So I'll tell you an easy way how you can manage here. So based on whatever revenue that you get, you can either fix a percentage of the revenue or a fixed amount, so that each month you're living within the means. So when you prepare your budget, it will give you a better clarity on how much money that you have with your disposal. So by setting yourself these limits, that you do have pockets where you can go and get yourself and not deprive yourself of the things that you want, and at the same time you are not going overboard with your expenses. So by classifying like this and setting yourself limits that are within your means, within your capacity, it's a good way to strike a balance between frugality and indulgence. So you could use this both in your business as well as in your personal finances, so that you're able to strike the right balance, which is pretty important. So as a parting note, what I would like to tell you is, in fact, right now I'm running a 21-day money challenge. It's free. It's on my YouTube channel. So I've just posting short videos on money management, and giving you little small activities that can be done at the end of it. So if you are interested, please feel free to go to my YouTube channel, and then you can follow these. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, hearing any of these things, I would also urge you to check out my latest book. It's called Get High, and it has tools and tricks to organize yourself better and be on the path of high performance. So what again I'd like to emphasize is, be prudent. These are challenging times for most people. So conserve as much as you can. It's important during these trying times. And wishing you the very best with your finances as well as in high performance.
Thank you, Sangeeta.
Thank you.
Before I introduce our next speakers or speaker, I would like to say in a few minutes, I would invite all our speakers to add their LinkedIn details on the chat and any other details um, that will enable you to reach out to them. I'm aware that we will not have much time for a discussion. So if you wanted to ask the panelists something specific, please go ahead and type the question or discussion point onto the chat, and you can reach out to them, be it for coaching, supervision, coach training, or whatever it is you want to inquire more about that they have mentioned. Feel free to reach out to them. Our next speaker is Iftikhar Nadeem, and he started his career as an engineer in the oil and gas sector, but focused on managing change through human energy. He's a coach and a coach educator.
Day zero of the 20.
He learns and supports senior leaders for peak performance based on science and the art of energy management. Ifti is an executive leadership coach and a coach educator. He holds a BSc and an MSc in Industrial Engineering and a PhD candidate in leadership coaching at Canterbury Christ Church University in the UK. Ifti has presented papers and seminars at both regional and international conferences on topics related to coaching processes. He has published several papers in referred journals and conferences on various coaching-related topics. He's also a certified facilitator for the Corporate Athlete Program that aims to create experiences of peak performance for business executives in the Arabian Gulf states. Ifti, thank you, and I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and it's a great honor and pleasure for me to speak from east coast of Saudi Arabia, which is very close to Bahrain, although I cannot go there and I miss that, crossing the border these days a lot, but that's fine. We can still connect with people through other means. So, and I like what Sangeeta said, the cash is oxygen, because you need oxygen and glucose to generate energy in the body cells, so the energy when it's created physically in the body cells, so you need oxygen and glucose when they react, just like when petrol and air react in a car and you produce energy there. So same way we produce energy in our body. So we need a lot of, lot of cash these days to generate that kind of energy. So since the program I do is best done in physical, in-person environment, however, I will, build on what Rumi said. He said, raise your words, not your voice. It's the rain that grows flowers, not the thunder, So we will depend more on the rain than the thunder. And in next, I'll take less than 10 minutes, and if we may have time for questions, and I'll keep to the point. We will try to learn what is human energy. I know Vijay has touched about it also, by the way, some dimensions, but I'll say what she did not say, so I'll try to complement what she has said about it. And how can we expand the energy? We have this energy we know as the best personal resource for us. Some people say time is our resource, but I think the best personal resource we all have is our personal energy. So because we may have time sometime, but we don't have energy, we say I'm tired, or I'm not in a mood. So all this means we don't have that energy to do what we want to do. So we may have time, but not energy. And another problem with time is that time is a limited resource. It cannot be expanded. It's finite. So, but energy can be, and it can be renewed as well. So energy is a renewable, expandable resource for humans. So the way I look at energy is what I learned from is science-based, and it's multidisciplinary, in fact, in learning. So a lot of it comes from sports psychology, or positive psychology as well, and some nutrition, physiology, and other principles we learn or borrow from different disciplines of science. And then you can add some practical wisdom to it. And this is how we then learn more about energy. And in physics, energy is defined as a capacity to work. If we look at the science purely, what is energy? It means capacity to work. So it's our capacity to perform, or sometimes that capacity is high, sometimes is low, but that's what it is. Now, as we grow in age, our energy capacity start going down, so after 30, usually with more responsibilities, like we have children, we have more responsibility at work, and we try to do other career things. So our demand goes up, but our supply goes down with time. So there is a gap start emerging. Usually at 30 plus, it may be different for different people, but it starts showing that there is a gap now between demand and supply. So you have more demand than your supply. So that's where we have this intersection where we need to focus on how can I expand my energy, or can have a more energy, so that I can do or work on what I want to work. So the way we look at energy, very similar to what Vijay has mentioned, is four-dimensional. Some people go more than 4 dimensions, also social and others, but I think 4 are good enough to not to complicate the whole thing. So if we focus on 4 dimension, and the first one is physical, which she talked on it a lot, and that's about quantity of energy. So what is the quantity, and which is very foundational, by the way, and I think she rightly mentioned, and that if you are sick, everything else start falling apart, so you cannot focus, you cannot, have a positive emotions, and obviously you cannot achieve a purpose if you have. So quantity of energy, it's very foundational, physical energy, but a lot depends on what we eat, and it does change immediately. The food is give you instant gratification sometimes. So, and when we are like hungry, our energy is low. When we are, overeat, energy is low sometimes. So that's where the oxygen thing also comes in, that you have to have oxygen with the food. Otherwise, food alone will not generate that energy. So if you eat, which we say eat light, eat often, eat light, and then take a walk, for example, that will bring more movement, will bring more oxygen, so the better reaction will take place and more energy will come. So what we eat and movements, I think she talked about all kind of movements, so I will not go there. Sleep is also extremely important, and we have sleep cycles, obviously, and most of these cycles are, for most people, 5 cycles, each one of average 90 minutes. So we have 7.5 hours. So 7 hours, that's why it's brought as a number. Usually how much I should sleep is 7 hours is a good number, because you may complete 5 cycles of sleep, And when you wake up at the end of cycle, you are usually more fresh than in the middle of the cycle, So that's why when we wake up with alarm, we are usually not in the best mood, because you are in middle of a cycle. Although it was 5th cycle, for somebody it could be even 6th cycle, but it will still give you that, oh, I'm tired, because you did not complete the cycle. And then breathing, I'm a big fan of breathing also, deep breathing and all that. also instantly can affect, your energy. Most sports people, like players, tennis players and others, they use breathing very strategically to keep their energy high. Now, next dimension is emotional, which is more quality of energy. What is the quality? And sometimes we measure it through emotions or negative emotion, positive emotion, although emotion should not be judged like positive, negative, but still whatever we understand as a negative emotion, or we call survival based emotions, or positive. You feel challenged will give you different energy than you feel, oh, I cannot do it, disappointed or something, angry. So they could be high intensity, low intensity emotions, but so emotions is another. So I don't know if people are engaged. I will ask them to ask this question to all the people, including the panelists, that what are you most grateful for today? You know. So let's do this little gratitude exercise. So if you can put in the chat box, what are you most grateful for today? That could be your life accumulated gratefulness. It doesn't have to be only this morning. So I see people putting something there. What are you most grateful for today?
Lovely conversations.
For waking up alive, yeah. Being safe and along the family. Yeah. Family word come very often, by the way. When I ask people, what are you grateful for? Family is very common. I'm breathing and happy, lovely conversation, feeling well. I'm breathing. Excellent. Excellent. So a lot of good thing people are grateful for, and that's so nice to hear. So that's because when we are grateful, we cannot be experiencing negative emotions, if you will, So they don't come together, So you are grateful. If you are really grateful, genuinely grateful, so that will generate a positive energy inside. So this is emotional dimension. How can we do that? And then comes the mental dimension of energy, which is more about focus. Are you doing one thing at a time, or you are multitasking? So our brains are this is more true about men's brain, especially, by the way. They do one thing at a time. They are not designed to do multitasking. If they try, they definitely compromise on energy for sure. I do that all the time. So, and what is the story in their mind? The story thing is also very, very important, because that sustains over a longer period. Like and some people are not able to detach from that story. And I remember Tiger Woods saying once that when I play a shot, and then one shot does not go right, chances are next will not go right. So I had to work on it. And then his coach helped him to detach from the previous shot, what happened in the previous shot. So if you can detach and learn how to detach, that every shot is a new shot, you can then detach and not carry over the baggage of the previous shot. So that is where it helps in the mental story, that, oh, I cannot do it because my shot is, oh, I'm going to lose. So even tennis players, we call in the dead time of tennis, when between the 2 points, there are 16 seconds. So what players think between these 16 seconds, between the 2 points, that is where players win or lose the whole game. There's a lot of research done by Jim Loehr. For 30 years, he worked with tennis players, and he learned players are same in biomechanical and they or in the skills or whatever. They only differ between what they think between the 2 points. So what goes through their mind between 2 points, whether they think they can win it or not, or play better or stable or use the even breathing better. So this is where the game is decided, you know. So it's a mental game, and that's why the players will tell you it's all mental game, you know, and how to have that mental energy, you know, during this game. The last thing is a spiritual, which is like a force of energy, you know. So spiritual mean, do you have a purpose in life, which has clarity, which has intensity, which has depth? So if that kind of purpose you are living with, you have endless energy, you know. And as we all know, Andre Agassi was, you know, #1 coach, tennis player in the world. But then when he became #1, he was quite disappointed with his achievement, in fact. So he went on drugs. He was so depressed. He went on drugs and he became like 140th position. So then when he worked with the coach and he found his purpose that he wanted to help underprivileged children in Vegas area where he belonged to. And he found a purpose. And next morning he was in gym, you know, 4 o'clock a.m. He was in the gym doing, and he became #1 player again, you know. So this is the power or the force of purpose. If you have a purpose and you're doing, it has a meaning and value, you never get tired. You have endless energy, as a matter of fact. Now, if we understand energy and now how to expand this energy, you know, so we do two ways. One is the vertical, you know, way we expand. That means we move from dimension to dimension, you know. So if you are in a physical dimension or you are in a mental dimension, let's say you are a office worker, you work whole day, you are mentally exhausted. So you have two choices. You go to physical dimension, that means you walk or go to gym and do something, and you will recover from mental dimension. So you will be mentally fresh again in 1 hour or less. Same is you could go to emotional dimension, you know, and that's what most people do. They go home and meet the family and the children and the hugs and all of that they do. So that gives them emotional energy. So they are moving from mental to emotional dimension. So this is one way that you go from vertically, you know. The other is obviously you go on a horizontal dimension, which is like you are working out and you are fatigued, you know, with a lot of exercise, and then you take rest, which is the other end, you know, on the horizontal dimension. So this is another way how can you renew your energy. And before I close, let's take a poll from the people. I think Smita, you have a poll uh, uh, to run. That let's see what people say. We have a poll that what is your biggest opportunity to expand your energy? You know, when now you understood what energy is, what are the dimensions. So what is your biggest you know, opportunity to expand your energy or grow your energy? I hope people are able to click it and okay, because host and panelist cannot vote, so only participants can. So maybe
Can we end?
we can stop and see the results. So if you want to share the results, yeah, great. So define a clear purpose of my life is where the 50% people are saying that is where, you know, and I totally agree, by the way. And I know people who come to my classes, they start with physical, but they end up with you know, defining a clear purpose. That's where they feel they need. So, which is excellent. That means the people here, they are very smart and they picked it right, hopefully. So Cindy, I will stop here. If you have anything else to question or whatever, I will be happy to take.
Thank you. Thanks, Ifti. Thanks to all the panelists. You know, this topic, aware, arise, awake, seems to be more alive now in simple ways and in bigger ways, right? Because we all picked up things that we want to think about and expand for ourselves and perhaps give it more reflection space. so that those become more a part of perhaps our purpose or something that we want to do. So, I'm very grateful to the panelists for raising more awareness and picking up on pieces that were so embedded in everyday living, our lived experiences. We've reached the end of our time. We've just got 3 minutes to go. We can't have much of a discussion, but I think there was immense value in what was already said. So thank you for that. If anybody wants to raise a particular question that maybe we can talk a bit more about in 3 minutes, feel free to do so. I have a question, and it's quite a emotional focused one, because there's many, you know, all aspects of what we're discussing today heads to our spiritual health or our spiritual wellness. But there's one that I found quite strange enough. I found that when I was in an emotional space, a negative one, and that happened quite often during COVID-19, where I would find myself like get into an emotional space, quite deep into it quickly. But the moment I switched on the TV or listened to somebody else, it became an outward thing, and I completely forgot what I was emotional about. So I found like there was a relief for myself in something else, outward, an outward thing. So where I hear you, I see you nodding. Explain a bit about that.
There's only one word to say: distraction.
That's what it is. Ah, yeah, but it was a good distraction.
Exactly. But I think that's part, and thank you for reminding us all that when we sit in judgment on coping, it's not usually a good idea. So if distraction works, it works. Maybe one doesn't want to do distraction all the time, not when you're driving, I guess, but yeah, but I think it's a lovely example. So thank you for offering that to all of us as we're starting to close out, is that we will need to find what works for us and be compassionate with others and ourselves, about what works, rather than have an attachment to what should work.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Svea. I think your body, your mind, you know it best, and it's okay. It's okay to do strange things that you wouldn't have done otherwise, and allow that to anchor you. I think that's fine.
Yeah, yeah. I would sometimes share with my children what I was feeling very emotional about, or share with my husband Gerald, and they would call a couple hours later. How are you doing now, Mom? And I would go, about what? You know, like it was gone, completely forgotten. Good, thank you. Any other closing thoughts from the panelists? There's a lovely question here. How do we weave all aspects into one for an holistic living and just being? Any thoughts on that?
I think to integrate everything together, I think that's what is the key, because even if you're doing well in some aspects and then you're bothered about something else, then it doesn't tantamount to holistic living. So it's essential that every aspect is balanced, be it your health, your finances, your emotion, your mental wellness, spiritual wellness, right? So I think having a good balance amongst all of these is the key.
I think what I want to add is every moment is an opportunity. And so just because you don't get it right, let's say for this hour, doesn't mean you should give up. And I think we need to remember that you can start at any time, and you can start as many times as you like with this taking whatever you can do in the moment. So like Viji's ideas about movement, all of us could get off our chairs when we finished right now and move. I mean, maybe not crawl on the floor like a baby, but move.
Yeah, no.
You know, and I was thinking Sagita was saying about her money. As you go to spend your money, is to think about some of those things each time, you know. And I mean, Iftikhar was saying about oxygen and energy, you know, so I think that every moment is an opportunity, never mind what you've just done for the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
Cindy, I want to actually give a slightly different twist to that, right? So, yeah, I think holistic is great, right? And is a wonderful space to be in, and certainly we should strive. And like Swaya said, make a lot of mistakes along the way and then just get back up. But I think it's also important to know that, you know, the whole you know, holistic wellness is work in progress, and it is work in progress. It takes time. It takes effort to get there, and sometimes you need to focus on one or two more dimensions a little bit more than others. And I think this time has really taught us that, and that's okay too. I mentioned, I saw Vanita type in saying about the imperfection. Yeah, I think being okay with the imperfection is also a good space to be in, and pick what is most relevant and what your wisdom says is best for you at this point of time. So that's my personal approach.
Yeah. If do you want to say something before I close? Yeah, go.
5% or 1% maybe then is that I think we should also learn how to live observer life rather than participant all the time, you know. So you are shifting from participant in life to observer in life, you know, which you become learner. I think some of you touched also. So detach from participant and see, go up a little bit and see what is happening, and experience everything coming on your way. If you want to experience whole life, welcome everything. You know, don't be resist or pick and choose. You know what you like or something. Welcome everything, and be observer at time, not only the participant.
Thank you, panelists. We've reached the end of our time, a few minutes over. It's been beautiful and enlightening and enriching engaging with you. And to all our attendees on YouTube and on Zoom, thank you for attending. And we'll continue staying in touch. And if there's any way in which the panelists can support, please reach out to them. The details are on the chat box. To Coacharya, this has been an amazing experience of being part of Awake, Aware, Arise. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Cindy,
Bye.
Coacharya, and
Bye.
all of you today for this amazing learning space.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.